Now, during the 70s, serial killer Peter Sutcliffe stalked the streets of West Yorkshire and across the north. Now a 7-part ITV drama will detail the chase to hunt down one of Britain's most notorious killers.
Well, we're now joined by Richard McCann, the son of Peter Sutcliffe's first murder victim. That was Wilma McCann. Thank you so much indeed for joining us today. Now, the drama series is going to be called The Long Shadow. And what I wonder, you were only 5 when your mum was murdered. Did it cast a long shadow over your life? And the way your mum was portrayed, did it cast a long shadow? Is this an apt name for the series?
Well, I never thought about the relationship with my mum and how she was described, but it's certainly, on reflection now all these years, 48 years later, it has cast a shadow, and I guess the impact of what he did all those years ago is still being felt, not just by me and my family, but I guess all the families, and not just the families involved, the people of West Yorkshire.
Yeah, but it was a week before your 6th birthday, and it had long-term effects on your sister. It
did. It affected us all, but, you know, in 13 years ago, she sadly, tragically took a life, and, you know, arguably, we can put that down to what happened that fateful night and the years that followed. You know, the stigma that came with it. There's lots of levels to this, but absolutely that is part of that long shadow. And
they sort of said, oh, these women, they were women of the night and they were going out. And for you to read that about your mum, who was brutally murdered, let's not forget it.
Yeah, that created this shame. I was ashamed of mum. I was actually ashamed of the picture that they used, a black and white picture, which reminded me of Myra Hindley. It was a mugshot of her when she was 18. So that stuck with me for many, many years, and, you know, I was really happy and grateful that finally we got the apology from West Yorkshire Police for the language that was used all those years ago. So yeah, and that stuck with me. It's like in my DNA, I suppose, which I try and manage as best I can, but it's still there.
Now, you've been very outspoken that you don't think that Peter Sutcliffe should be described as the Yorkshire Ripper, which is obviously what he's become known as. Why do you feel so strongly about that, Richard?
Well, first of all, even as you say that moniker, or use those words, it triggers me a little bit, because if you think about what that word is describing, so it's a triggering word, so I don't like that. But if you think about that, what it did back then, the press and the police, and they still do call him that name, it almost makes him out to be something that is actually not, this mystical figure. And so when they're faced with, or when they were faced with, this mildly mannered, softly spoken individual, it was miles away from what the press had conjured up, this being. And also, I think it kind of derailed the investigation, because calling him that inspired John Humble, who took the letters that the police back in the Victorian times, the Jack they were sent letters. He modelled his letters on that, and that actually cost women their lives towards the end of the investigation, because they're looking for this Geordie hoaxer. Anyway, we could talk all day about that, but there's lots of reasons why I don't like that.
You're speaking at the Leeds International Festival of Ideas next week about obsession with true crime and things like that. Why do you think that we have such a fascination with serial killers in the way that we do? And do you think that we spend too much time focusing on them rather than on their victims?
I think we do, on the whole, although the drama that starts on Monday, The Long Shadow, is the opposite, because he features not until the very end. This is about the families involved. I'm not sure whether we've got an obsession. If I'm honest with you, I watch true crime programmes. I don't know if it's because I've been affected by Mum's death and I want to see the perpetrators brought to book, but I'm not sure whether we've got an obsession. Yeah, but I do think people are fascinated in what brings people to carry out those crimes.
But like you said, in the space of 5 years, he murdered 13 women and he attempted to murder another 7. And is it about time that those women's stories were heard?
Absolutely. You know, for many, many years, there were just black and white pictures, there were numbers, there were names, and that was it. And these are, or were, mothers, sisters, daughters, aunts, and I think what you're going to see in the ITV drama is the bigger picture, and it humanises them. That's what it does, and it was absolutely fantastic to watch.
I remember growing up myself, and this was happening, that I remember how it impacted my life. You'd make sure you weren't walking on the streets alone, you know, getting a bus home as a kid, what was going to happen, and it did prey on my mind. But as for you, have you spent your whole life worried about these kind of attacks?
not my whole life, but my childhood, before he was arrested, when he killed Jane McDonald, apparently the first innocent, they were all innocent, of course, when she was killed, she lived 6 houses from where we lived with my mum. She babysat for us, not the night Mum died. When he killed her, I thought, he's going to kill me. And I lived in fear for a number of years. And then eventually we had the hoax tapes, this Geordie voice. I was listening out for this voice. When he was arrested, obviously, I didn't fear that. But, of course, these things do impact on you, and I've got children of my own now, so I fear for them, and I fear about what goes on in the world. So, but the initial fear was ended when he was arrested.
That's good to hear, because I felt that. I still feel that, because you don't know, it's the worst thing that could possibly happen, and you just wouldn't know. So I could imagine you living with that fear. Yeah,
absolutely. And as being a parent now, I mean, we all worry, don't we, as parents, of what might happen.
I mean, I remember growing up in Yorkshire at the time, everyone was petrified. I mean, it's difficult to overstate how worried people were in Yorkshire about, how dangerous it was to go out at night. And it wasn't, even not just for women, people were genuinely scared. I just wonder, how do you feel watching these things now? If you're watching a drama about Peter Sutcliffe or even other true crime things, how does it make you feel when you watch these things?
Well, generally speaking, I want to empathise with the families, the victims. That's what I experience when I watch these things. But I don't think we've seen many dramatisations of Peter Sutcliffe. I think there was one 2000, I think it was. I didn't watch that, but I watched this one, and when I saw it, I was gobsmacked at the accuracy of what took place. In my case, in particular, they've got it down to a T, and I think they're doing a really great job.
Did they get in touch with you? And did they say, how would you like to see your mum portrayed, or what don't you want to hear?
We had a general conversation.
Did you have?
I mean, it was obvious where they were heading with this in the first instance, that they were going to do this sensitively. And they have done that, a fantastic job of that. And they've portrayed my mum in particular as this loving mum, and I don't know if you've seen it, but putting us to bed. But yeah, so they've done a great job. What I did ask them to do, or invite them to do, was to not use the R word, the moniker, in the title, and I was really pleased to see that they did that. What I've been less pleased with is, over the last few weeks, where we've had lots of publicity about it, all the tabloids, they're all using this moniker. Once and for all, can't we stop that? Jacqueline Hill's mother, 42 years ago, asked the press, stop using that moniker. It somehow creates something that he isn't. He's a monster, and uses...
You want his name used. Some people might say, we don't want to ever hear his name again, we don't want to give him fame, but it pushes us to now use his name, Peter Sutcliffe, and show his face. But you'd say you'd sooner everybody know how evil he is, not use a sort of, as you say, a moniker or whatever.
Yeah. Not just him, all of them. I mean, I believe he inspired Stephen Griffiths, in the killer in Bradford, who, when he went to court, he was asked by the judge, what's your name? And he didn't say Stephen Griffiths. He said, I am the crossbow. I won't even say the second word because it's too triggering. But he was inspired by Peter Sutcliffe. He had a book on him in his flat when he was arrested. So I think is it too much to ask to stop using these insensitive names?
No, it's not, and you're right to.
And I just wondered, Richard, there was obviously a lot of criticism at the time of the West Yorkshire Police handling of the case and how long it took to bring Peter Sutcliffe to justice. They interviewed him, I think, 8 or 9 times before they finally got him for good. Do you feel sort of any bitterness about how badly West Yorkshire Police handled that inquiry, or are you understanding of how difficult it was for them at the time?
I mean, they made mistakes. We know that. It's been well documented. I don't think there's anything to be gained by repeatedly pointing the finger at them for making those mistakes. And I think, including the language that was used, I think we've learned. I would hope that they've learned. But I have to say, and it comes through in the drama, the misogyny that took place all those years ago, which impacted on that investigation, is still being felt today. So I'm really grateful that they're visiting this series of events through that misogynistic lens to bring it to our attention, because it still happens.
Richard McCann, thank you so much for coming in today, and I will be watching that drama series and thinking of you and your mum.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.